Today we're going to start factoring trinomials. So here's an example of a trinomial. You'll notice in today's examples the coefficient in front of the x squared term will always be 1. We'll get to the more difficult examples another time. But for today, we're going to go through 6 examples of how to factor a trinomial into 2 binomials when the leading coefficient is just 1. So you know how to FOIL now, and what we're going to be doing today is basically backwards FOILing. Just like factoring out a greatest common factor is like backwards distributive property, factoring a trinomial into 2 binomials is going to be backwards FOIL. And so if you ever want to check your answer, all you'll need to do is FOIL it back out and see what you get and make sure that it matches what we started with. So you'll notice in our first 2 examples, both signs are plus signs. The first question I'll always ask when we're factoring a trinomial is, what's the sign in the back? So if there's a plus sign in the back, so right here, right before our constant term, that means that the 2 signs in your parentheses will be the same. They won't necessarily be plus signs, but if there's a plus sign in the back, it means they'll be the same. Then to know which sign it's going to be, you look at the middle term. So if there's a plus sign in the back, it means they're the same. If there's another plus sign in the middle, it means that they're both going to be plus signs. So in our 2 parentheses, we're going to put 2 plus signs. So that's half the battle, is knowing what sign goes in each place. And when the leading coefficient is 1, we know that to start, we're just going to have an x in both of those 2 front places, because then if we were to FOIL it out, we would take x times x, and that's how we would get that x squared term. All right, so then the next question we ask ourselves is we have to find the 2 numbers that go here and here. To figure out what 2 numbers go in those places, we look at the back number, and we need to pick 2 numbers that multiply to get 16, and the same 2 numbers that multiply to 16 need to add to 10. Oh my. All right, so some numbers that multiply to get 16, we know 1 times 16, 2 times 8, 4 times 4. Those are all some numbers that might pair up to multiply to get that 16 term. So we want them to multiply to get this last term, but we also want them to add together to get that middle term. So 1 plus 16 is obviously not 10, but 2 plus 8 is. It doesn't matter which number you write first, whether it's the 8 or the 2, because both of them have plus signs there. So our final answer would be x plus 2 times x plus 8. And then you could always check your answer by FOILing that out. So x times x is x squared. X times 8 is 8x. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 8 is 16. So when we combine our middle terms, we get what we started with. All right, so same thing here. We're going to factor this trinomial into 2 binomials because the leading coefficient is 1. We can go ahead and write x and x right there and there. Our back sign is plus, which means our signs are going to be the same. So we look to the middle. They're both going to be plus signs. Now we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to get 14, and when we add the 2 numbers, we get 9. And those 2 numbers would be 2 and 7. So x plus 2, x plus 7. Again, it could say x plus 7, x plus 2. It doesn't really matter when both signs are the same. So for example, 3 and 4 out of our 6, notice again that we have a plus sign in the back, but this time I traded out that middle sign for a minus sign instead of a plus sign. So we're going to be factoring it into 2 binomials. The leading coefficient is 1, so we can go ahead and stick in our x's. Our back term is a plus sign. That means our 2 signs in the parentheses are going to be the same, but this time they're both going to be minus signs. But from here, our steps are still the same. We want 2 numbers that multiply to get 12, and when we add them, we get negative 8. And we know that both of them are going to be negative numbers because both of our signs are negative numbers. So 12 has a lot of factors. We have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. But we know when we take negative 2 and negative 6, that's when we'll get negative 8. So our final answer would be x minus 2 times x minus 6, or x minus 6 times x minus 2. Right, example 4. We set up our parentheses. Leading coefficient is 1, so we can put x and x right away. Our back sign is a plus sign, which means our signs are going to be the same. In this case, they're both subtraction signs. So it means our two factors are negative. So we want two numbers that multiply to get 27. And when we add them together, we get negative 12. And those two numbers would be negative 3 and negative 9. And again, you can always check your work by foiling what you just got and making sure you get what we started with. With our final two examples, we're going to put a subtraction sign before our constant term. When we have a subtraction sign back there, it just makes our work a little bit trickier because when we set up our parentheses, if a plus sign in the back means that our signs are going to be the same, a minus sign in the back means they're going to be different. It means we're going to have one positive set and one negative set. Or in other words, we have a positive and a negative number that multiply to get negative 21 and that add to get positive 4. So first step, just like before, we think about some factors of negative 21. So some factors of 21, we know it's not divisible by 2, but we do have 1 and 21. And in this case, because we have a plus and a minus sign, we can also flip-flop them. So now we can say positive 1 and negative 21, or positive 21 and negative 1. But when you add positive 1 and negative 21, we do not get positive 4, so that wouldn't work. Another factor, or another couple factors, we have positive 3 and negative 7. We also have positive 7 and negative 3. So if we do positive 3 and negative 7, when we add those together, we get negative 4. But if we add positive 7 and negative 3, we get positive 4. So our two factors would be x plus 7 and x minus 3. You could write it x minus 3 and x plus 7, but the positive set has to go with the 7 and the negative set must go with the 3. All right, so let's try another example. So again, leading coefficient is 1, so we can go ahead and put x and x right there. Our sign in the back is a minus sign, subtraction sign, which means our two signs and the two sets will be different. One will be positive and one will be negative. And then they need to multiply to get negative 8, but when we add them together, we get negative 7. And because when we're adding them, we get negative 7, that means our bigger number is the number that's going to be negative. So some factors of 8, we have 1 and 8, or 8 and 1. We have 2 and 4, or 4 and 2. So when we go through, if we take positive 1 and negative 8, we do get negative 7. So first try. So our final answer would be x plus 1 and x minus 8, or x minus 8 and x plus 1. And remember, you can always check your answer by distributing that out or foiling it out and making sure that your final trinomial is what we started with.